Lest haply, if they of Macedonia come with me and find you unprepared, we, that we say not ye, should be ashamed in this same confident boasting. Therefore I thought it necessary to exhort the brethren that they would go before unto you and make up beforehand your bounty, whereof ye had noticed before, that the same might be ready as a matter of bounty and not as covetousness. So the Corinthians here have been an example to the Macedonians. And Paul had bragged on them to the Macedonians. And it was encouraging to them. But he was saying to them, I need you to follow through with your giving. I'm encouraging you. Don't embarrass me. I've bragged on you. Don't embarrass me now that I've bragged on you. You ever bragged on somebody and then they let you down? Ooh, it's embarrassing. You've got egg on your face when that happens. And Paul's saying, I've bragged on you. Be sure you just go ahead and gather up what you have to give so that I'm not embarrassed when I come to you. Paul helped the church make a plan for giving. It is our responsibility to make a plan for giving to God. It's our responsibility to do that. If you don't do that, you will wind up spending money that belongs to God. You've got to make a plan. Steve gets his Social Security check once a month. He gets paid from subbing at school once a month. I get my teacher's pay once a month. And I have to plan that along about the middle of the month, I'm going to have to tithe and give my offerings to the church. And I can't wait and say, well, I'll do that, at the end of the month or beginning of next month, because I'm telling you something, it goes out faster than it comes in. So you've got to plan. You've got to say, you know what, I've got to be sure to pull out my tithes and take care of that first. That's the first fruits, and I've got to do that first. And if you don't understand tithing, if you don't know about tithing, I encourage you to talk to Pastor Nathan or to somebody you trust to explain how that works, because we are required to tithe any income we receive. 10% of what we take in should be tithed back to the Lord. If somebody gives you birthday money, you owe 10% of that to God. If somebody gives you money for some chore you've done, you owe 10% of that to God. Whatever you take in, 10% of that belongs to God. When we learn to trust in God's grace and we learn to give to Him what is His, He'll take care of us. He'll take care of us. Back in 1988, it's probably late 87 actually. In late 1987, I was getting ready to build my home. And it was going to be an FHA loan. It was for people with low income. I wasn't teaching at the time. I was living in poverty. And I was getting ready to have that house built. And there was this extensive application we had to fill out with FHA to talk about our income and our expenses, because they didn't want to give us a loan where we couldn't pay the house payment, because there was going to be a house payment. And they began to have us to list, our expenses. And so they talked about, well, how often do you go get your hair cut? Oh, we just have family to do it. Okay, well, that saves you some money. Well, what do you spend on groceries? What do you spend on gas? What do you spend on a car payment? What do you spend on this? What do you spend on that? And then they looked at us and they said, can you think of anything else that you do? And I said, well, we tithe to our church. And the FHA agent said, what are you talking about? He didn't know. And I said, we give 10% of our income to the church. And his eyes got about that big around, and he looked at us and he said, with no more money than you have, you're giving 10% of it to a church? Why? And I said, well, sir, God takes care of us that way. I've never missed a meal. That was my answer to him. And we've got to get to that place that we recognize that what we have is because God enables us to have it. And in the blink of an eye, you can be gone. We're required to give back to God and to trust God that He'll take care of us. Let's look at 1 Corinthians 16, 1 through 4. 1 Corinthians 16, 1 through 4. Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I have given order to the churches of Galatia, even so do ye. Upon the first day of the week, let every one of you lay by him in store, as God hath prospered him, that there be no gatherings when I come. And when I come, whomsoever ye shall prove by your letters, them will I send to bring your liberality unto Jerusalem. And if it be meet that I go also, they shall go with me. Here Paul is given a plan to the church for giving, and he's telling them to set aside the money the first day of the week. And he says, as God hath prospered him. You know, I may give less to the church than somebody sitting on the other side of the aisle. I may give more to the church than somebody sitting on the other side of the aisle. But it's not whether you give less or whether you give more. It's whether or not you do your part. We all have our part. If you ever hear somebody bragging about what they give into the church, they just got their blessing. They got to brag. It's not about how much you give. It's about what kind of attitude you give with. Are you giving out of a boastful spirit? Are you giving out of a cheerful heart because you want to bless the house of God? And you'll be rewarded accordingly. 1 Corinthians 16, sorry, I read that. 2 Corinthians 8, 8 through 15. I speak not by commandment, but by occasion of the forwardness of others, and to prove the sincerity of your love. For ye know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, that ye through his poverty might be rich. And herein I give my advice, for this is expedient for you, who have begun before, not only to do, but also to be forward a year ago. Now therefore perform the doing of it, as there was a readiness to will, so there may be a performance also out of that which ye have. For if there be first a will in mind, it is accepted according that a man hath, and not according to that he hath not. For I mean not that other men be eased, and ye be burdened, but by an equality, that now at this time your abundance may be a supply for their want, that their abundance also may be a supply for your want, that there may be equality. As it is written, he that hath gathered much had nothing over, and he that had gathered little had no lack. We're to give so that we can be a blessing to others, and others are to give so they can be a blessing to us. We bless each other when we do what we need to do. Paul cites here Christ as an example of sacrificial giving. I want you to think a minute about all that Jesus gave up. He was in a city with streets of gold, surrounded by heavenly beings that worshiped him and adored him and cried out to him, holy, holy, holy. And he gave that up to come to earth, to become a man, to be born in a stable, not even born in a decent place the way the world would view it, to be born. He chose some of the lowliest people on the earth to serve with him and minister with him. Fishermen. Y'all know how fish stink? Think about that. He chose those men. He chose people that were just common people to walk with him. And he ministered to the poor. He was the King of Kings. He had it all. He had it all. But he didn't set himself above the people. He gave to everybody liberally. It didn't matter. It didn't matter if you were among the richest of people, because he did associate with some rich people too. But he made no difference in those people. He ministered to them all. God's called us to do the same thing. We're to minister to everybody. We're to be that example that Jesus was for us, of meeting the needs of people who need things and being willing to lay down what God has blessed us with for the sake of blessing others. I'll never forget, it's been, I don't even know, probably 40 years ago, probably. About 40 years ago, I was living with my in-laws. Had no home of my own. Had a son that was small, and just getting by the best I knew how. Attending a church where the pastor would sometimes go on different revival trips, and sometimes he would even go to the mission field and minister. And I don't remember exactly where he was headed, but he had a trip scheduled. And it was a Sunday, and he got up that morning and he, took up an offering, and, he announced that the offering would go toward this trip he had. And then at the end of service, when I was getting ready to leave, I asked him, I said, "Pastor, did you get what you needed?" And he said, "No, I didn't." I said, "I'm sorry. I wish I could help you." I had nothing. I had nothing to give him. And I went home, and that night, I was getting ready to go to bed, and I had a little light jacket on over the shirt I was wearing, and I stuck my hand in the pocket of that little light jacket, and I felt something in that pocket. And I pulled it out, and it was a folded up $100 bill. I can't tell you to this day where that bill came from. I can tell you that the life I was living financially, I would not have put a $100 bill anywhere and forgot it was there. Like I hardly even saw a $100 bill. So I still to this day don't know where it came from. But I reached in that pocket and I pulled that $100 bill out and I looked at it. And I said, "I've got to go take this to the pastor." I needed that $100 bill. I could have used that $100 bill. I could have used it. I needed it. But God, I believe, in some way or other, I don't know if somebody slipped that $100 bill in there or if God just placed it in there. But God blessed me with that $100 bill. And I drove and I got that pastor and his wife up out of the bed. And I handed him that $100 bill, and he said, "Sister, that's what I needed."